Last night, Russia was on fire. In Saratov, drones slammed into an oil refinery there. In Novorossiysk, a major drone raid hit the massive Sheshkaris oil terminal, a key export hub on the Black Sea that could cut Russia's ability to export oil by 8 to 10%. In occupied Feodosia, Crimea, another critical maritime oil terminal was also struck, but something else also got hit. An entire storage base for Russian Orion attack drones. In occupied Donetsk, a metallurgical plant used as a Russian military base was also hit, and it knocked out 22 transformer substations. But the most significant attack may have been on the city of Oryol, deep inside Russia, because what we saw there is a little bit different. Ukrainian officials have confirmed this was a new long-range cruise missile, the Flamingo, that was used. The Flamingo is a Ukrainian-made weapon designed to fly 3,000 kilometers or 1,800 miles. Now, Russia's Ministry of Defense claims that it shot down 130 drones, but the fires across the country told a very different story. In one night, Ukraine proved that nowhere in European Russia is safe. Its oil, its logistics, its air defense, its drone bases are all targets. This is not just a military failure. It is a direct attack on the bank account of the Russian state. But to understand this, to understand why this is so important and why this very well could end the war, you must understand how Russia operates. Don't think of it like a government. It's not. It's much more like a mafia family. And Vladimir Putin is a dictator, but he's also the godfather of that mafia family. Today, his ministers operate like capos or lieutenants, running around fighting their turf wars. They're fighting over who will control the wealth of Russia, the gas wealth, the vast oil reserves. All of this is part of the family business. But Ukraine is not just targeting military targets at night. It is firebombing the family's main warehouse. Consider the Sheshkaris terminal in Novorossiysk. That is probably the perfect example. It is one of the largest oil loading complexes on the Black Sea. It is the endpoint for Russia's main pipelines. These strikes now, adding up over the last few months, have taken off about 38% of Russia's oil refining capacity. The financial damage looks like it could be as high as $30 billion in lost revenue. But that's not just a problem for the Russian state. It's a problem for the Russian mafia, the Kremlin, because that was money that they were planning on stealing. But today, we see that the pie is shrinking and the knives are coming out. This is not just a regional war. It's a story about who will control the future of the country, a country that's increasingly becoming unstable, a nuclear-armed state with a paranoid leader. This is now today becoming something else, though. And this is the very interesting part. It is a crisis of succession. Who will take over this state after Putin? And Ukraine's drones, they are accelerating this civil war in the Kremlin in real time. My name is Jason Smart. I'm a special correspondent for the Kiev Post and a national security advisor. What's fascinating about Russia is that it's so different from what many people think it is. It's in fact a totally different country from any other country in Europe or in the world that I can think of. And as somebody who's studied Russia for a long time, and I wrote my master's and doctoral dissertations about the Putin regime and how it functions, probably one of the top questions I get is, so why are they so different? What makes them so unique? And the secret, in short, don't think of it like a government. It doesn't operate like a normal government. Think of it like a mafia, like a criminal family. And when you do, then everything makes a lot more sense. Then why they do what they do, that to us seems totally wild, it actually makes a lot of sense. It all fits together very well. So let's dive into that. Let's look at exactly what is going on inside of Moscow, because once you see this, once you connect these dots, you will forever look at Moscow differently. But first, I just want to thank everybody who has chosen to subscribe to this channel over the past half a year. Incredibly, this channel exists, as you know, only to support Ukraine. I'm here in Kiev, Ukraine, and last night we got attacked. It was a very loud night. There were explosions, machine gun fire going on for hours and hours. But there's something else here. The attacks on Ukraine, did it change anything? It changed nothing. Ukraine has the exact same resolve as it did yesterday. And though everybody here in Kiev perhaps only slept an hour or two last night, nobody has changed their opinion. Nobody wants to join Russia. Nobody's going to give up. But that's the difference. Within Russia, they can't just withstand this forever. These attacks are destroying their entire system. And that's why for Russia, it's them that is going to be desperate to get a peace deal, not Ukraine. So if you haven't already, please help me with one small thing. to get the truth about what's happening here in Ukraine and what's really happening inside of Russia to more people. All I ask you to do is please subscribe to this channel, like this video, leave your comments below, and send this video to others, and consider becoming a channel member today. And just one last thing. Thank you, everybody who helped us reach our goal of 50,000 euros of life-saving drones for the Ukrainian soldiers. Those drones truly are saving lives, and I sincerely thank you. So let's first get something clear about the Putin regime. For the army clan, for instance, last night's attack, those attacks across Russia, was a total disaster. It showed that they were incredibly incompetent. It made them look weak. It was a humiliation for them as Ukrainian drones continued to strike deep inside of Russia. But the security services, centered on the FSB, they see something else. Their power comes from internal control, investigations, and protecting stability. Every refinery on fire is proof, in their telling of the story, that the military is incompetent, that it's corrupt, that it needs to be taken away and have less responsibility. And the responsibility, with budget, should be given to the FSB. But there's something else going on. For the FSB, a long, grinding war is very useful. It justifies expanded surveillance and emergency laws, and also creates the constant flow of traitors and saboteurs, which they can investigate. But even more important than that, it allows them to go shake people down in the military-industrial complex, but it also keeps armed veterans at the front and in the occupied territories, and not idly sitting in Moscow. But there's something else as well. Rosgvardia, the National Guard, it sits between the army and the FSB. Now, it was created back in 2016 with Viktor Saratov. He's their commander. He was formerly Vladimir Putin's bodyguard and is known to be a diehard Putin loyalist. And he is trusted to protect Putin and his regime. He's not there to protect the government. He's not there to protect the Russian state. He has tanks, not to protect the Russian state. It is to protect the Putin regime. And we saw that after the Wagner mutiny, Rosgvardia was given heavy weapons. And these new rules allow it to receive artillery, armored vehicles, tanks, and all these things add up. Why would they need all this? Why do they need such heavy infrastructure? Well, so they can wage war against the military if necessary. If the military chooses to revolt, as we saw with Prigozhin's people. However, things like last night's attack, they are not good for things like Rosgvardia. The National Guard needs to show that it's protecting the homeland. It's in charge, actually, of protecting infrastructure. But today, it looks like it's failing. And that's where it's left to have to answer questions why its internal security has not prevented repeated blows to strategic sites. But at the same time, we see something else happening. At the very top, we see that Vladimir Putin himself is doing something he's never done historically. He's appointing more and more of his cousins, more and more of his relatives to have senior positions. As you know, the Deputy Defense Minister, Anna Tsilova, is in fact his niece. Now, officially, she handles the veterans and social issues, but in practice, she's in charge of the money for the Defense Department. And it's probably no surprise, the Defense Department gets about 41% of the budget of Russia. But you might wonder, what does her husband do? Is he also involved in this corruption? Well, in fact, her husband, Sergei Tsilov, he runs the energy ministry. So he is in charge of what produces about 40 to 45% of the Russian budget. What's incredible about that, though, is that Vladimir Putin today is appointing more and more of his relatives to these very senior positions. So what's behind that? Why is he doing that now? What's he looking for? Well, it seems today he's becoming very concerned. He sees that across Russia there are these attacks, like the one in Saratov, and that is cutting their export volumes, their tax income, their future contracts. All of it is going down the drains. And that's why today he has to turn to his cousin and say, what can be done? The fact is, she doesn't have a lot of solutions. She herself is not a military person, and they have less and less skilled people there. And frankly, we all know why her real job is. Her real job is to make sure that she siphons off more money for the Putin clan. And that's why Russia has more and more problems. These people, they're not operating what would be Russia's best interest if the objective was to win a war. Their objective is to improve their own position within the Kremlin elite. But look at the fighting we see today in Pokrovsk. It is directly related to this. So on the ground, we know that much of the area is already rubble and it's cratered fields. Militarily, the gain there, it's extremely limited. There's no ability to use the trains there or anything else. So for logistics, it's not a huge boon for the Russians. But why are they talking about so much? Why are they talking so much about Pokrovsk? Remember, the objective was a 3-day special military operation to take Kiev. But now, 1,361 days into this war, the most they could talk about is that hopefully Soon, we will encircle Pokrovsk. Not quite the same as taking Kiev. Well, the reason it's a big deal is they need to show some victories. But beside that, politically, for Belousov, the Minister of Defense, this matters a great deal. For the Defense Ministry, Pokrovsk is a scoreboard. It's not just a location. Heavy losses there can be buried in statistics, but you can declare it to be a success. You could say that you delivered the results that the boss wanted. And right now, he needs something that looks like a win to show Putin that he's not simply an economist that doesn't understand what's happening as the assets of the state continue to burn. But for the FSB, the same battle, it's also a tool. Let's look at how they would look at it. So if Russia advances only slowly in the high losses, then they can present the army as being wasteful, being unreliable, as being unnecessary. Now, today, what's very interesting within Russia, and a lot of people don't understand, is how difficult it is becoming for Putin to balance all this. Putin himself, we realize, is becoming less involved in the day-to-day operations of the Kremlin. In fact, a study just came out by Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, and they found that Vladimir Putin has 3 different estates with the rooms, offices that look identical. These beige rooms are found just outside of Moscow, another one's in Valdai, and another one is in Sochi. What's amazing is that the objective was to show that Vladimir Putin is always in Moscow, but he could in fact be anywhere. But this investigation found that if you look at the photographs, you'll see certain little mistakes, little errors, like where things get plugged into the wall, that's different between these different facilities. But also found something else. In his last 30 public presentations, where he was speaking from his office, he wasn't in Moscow. In 29 of them, he was actually in Valdai. Now, Valdai, you'll recall, is where he has his estate. It's quite far from Moscow, and he lives down there with his family. He's thought to live with his partner as well as with 2 children who are both minors. Now, what's interesting about that is, why does he stay out there? Why does he stay so far from Moscow? Well, it's actually opening him up to a lot of problems. If you're that far from Moscow, how can you know what's going on? How do you keep your hand on the pulse? How do you know what's transpiring? And that's leading to more and more of this fighting, and not just fighting, but each of these factions trying to convince Putin to not trust the other ones, to have him fear what they might be up to. And that's something that is already paying dividends, because we've seen now the increase of the people who are getting arrested from different services. As because Putin, his paranoia is increasing. And that paranoia does not help leaders make better decisions. It helps leaders make more paranoid decisions. So right now within Russia, we can't understand necessarily everything that they do. But when we look at something that seems it's totally irrational, why does Putin not want to end this war? Why doesn't he just take a deal offered to him by the White House? Well, maybe it's not just about this war. Maybe it's not about Ukraine. As I've said before, this war has never been about Ukraine. It's been about the Kremlin. Vladimir Putin likes to portray himself as being very assured of himself, that he's got everything under control. But if you look at these moves, the fact that he's not in Moscow anymore, the fact that he's had to arrest so many generals, the fact that there are so many different people in Moscow talking about him and what comes after him, and that he is sort of out of the loop, these are things that usually lead to bad outcomes for dictators. So we can't predict exactly what will happen next, but there's one thing we can be sure about. Ukraine's attacks on Russian oil facilities, they won't be slowing down. And as they continue, the Putin regime, it will become ever more a house of cards. Thank you for watching. Please like this video, please subscribe to the channel, and consider becoming a channel member. And do leave your comments down below. And if you haven't already, please check out the first pinned comment of how you too could donate for the Ukrainian soldiers to get life-saving drones. As always, thank you for supporting Ukraine.